GHF, as it's known, is an independent, neutral American nonprofit with one mission and one mission alone, which is to feed the people of Gaza in a way that Hamas or anyone else can't steal it. We've done it to the tune of over 170 million meals put directly into the hands of the people who need it most in less than 4 months.
What was the typical distribution for humanitarian aid before you were involved?
So one of the reasons GHF was created was because the legacy system in Gaza had failed. The government of Israel had lost faith in it for many reasons, the main which was diversion of aid. Whether that was Hamas stealing it, other armed gangs stealing it, or some other type of diversion. The aid wasn't getting to where it was supposed to be. It was furthering Hamas's war efforts, and there was a lot of politics involved in the situation. So we came out of a call from President Trump for innovative solutions. I believe he made that call last fall. There were plenty of strange, wacky ideas that came out of that for a couple of months, and then we were incorporated in Delaware as a nonprofit in February, and we began food distribution at the end of May of this year. And we would describe ourselves as an emergency food distribution operation.
What was food distribution like when it did get to where it was supposed to go before you guys got involved?
So I don't want to speak for the legacy system aid organizations. I'm not sure much of it got to where it was supposed to.
But I mean, did they do the same thing that you do?
Sorry.
Once it got to that point?
Good question. So we have a pretty unique model and a different model, which is one of the reasons the legacy system is one of our biggest critics. So we have secure distribution sites, which we have 4 of them. We were supposed to have 8 of them throughout Gaza. We rely on the IDF to build, deconflict, and create humanitarian zones, and then turn the sites over to us. So we push them every day to get us to at least the original 8. We also only operate from central Gaza to south. We do not operate in the north, where the need is greater.
And why is that?
It's there's more population, so we are within reach of about 1 million Gazans where we are located.
It's about half, right?
Right. There are over 2 million Gazans, and a lot of them are populated in Gaza City and those areas. It was also the last Hamas stronghold. So the IDF has already secured, for example, Rafah, where some of our sites are,
which is like the southernmost.
That's right. It's where, and it used to be a Hamas stronghold, and it is no longer. The IDF has basically turned it to rubble, and we built our sites, and now we distribute food mostly to people who are from the area. Though over the past couple of weeks, with the intensified operations by the IDF in the north, we have seen an influx of people to the south. But so our model is unique. We have safe distribution sites, is one unique aspect. The second unique aspect is we use or employ, I should say, local Palestinians on site. They run each site and are the first instance dealing with the crowd and organizing the crowds of aid seekers and distributing the aid.
Is that safe for them?
It is not. It's one of, it's a very dangerous job. They live on site now, and they cover their faces. They are also unarmed and don't wear protective armor by choice. But they live on site because of a very tragic incident that happened, I believe, in mid-June of this year. They used to take a bus to work to our sites, and Hamas hijacked one of the buses, murdered 9 on the bus. And the rest, so they sort of ran away. A crowd sort of got them to run away, and the rest, about 21 survivors, were left at Nasser hospital, and they were refused treatment there and left to die in the parking lot in the courtyard. Right, these are Gazans solely for having the audacity to help us feed their friends, neighbors, and families. So yes, all of them now live on site on our sites. They work alongside our humanitarian team.
But wait, before you go further, I just want to go back to that incident and understand what happened. The crowd got Hamas to run away, or the crowd got injured?
Hamas sort of fled the scene.
I see.
I was not there. I was told it's because there were too many others, non-Hamas people. So Hamas came, they hijacked the bus, they shot some people, and then they fled. The remaining survivors, of which there were, I think, almost 24, were then brought by their fellow Gazans to Nasser Hospital.
And people might argue, well, there weren't enough doctors at Nasser Hospital. Maybe that's why they didn't treat them.
Yeah, so you would have to ask them why. We believe that they weren't even brought inside. We have heard reports that there aren't enough doctors, there isn't enough medicine. We can go into it later, but this is across Gaza. This is one of the most complex humanitarian crises of our lifetime, and it's happening in an active war zone. You just saw about a month ago, the IDF attacked Nasser Hospital because there was a threat there. We've all read reports that hostages were held there at one point.
And when this incident happened, was there any sort of medical humanitarian organization working there?
Doctors Without Borders is based there. We know. I don't know if there are any others, but they are definitely based at or operate out of Nasser Hospital.
So they would have been aware that there were
presumably
people seeking help.
Presumably, again, they were not allowed inside; they were left to die.
And so now your Palestinian workers want to stay inside the secured area.
Correct. Yes, our sites are guarded 24 hours a day by a security team that lives there when they're on duty, and also by our threat assessment team at our operations center on the Israeli side of the border that monitors via cameras, our sites 24 hours a day. Their main job is threat assessment. Along with, we work with the IDF. If the IDF tells us there is a Hamas threat in the area, we will close the site or not open it if the threat is going to be to aid seekers or our people.
Close it temporarily until
correct.
The threat is clear?
Yes, our most northern site, STS-4, is closed every couple of days because it is near a Hamas stronghold. Logistically, it's complicated. There's structures for people to hide under, and there have been threats, IEDs located, and the IDF is taking care of outside the site. We're responsible for the safety and security of everybody, including and especially the aid seekers on our sites, and the IDF, of course, is responsible for the humanitarian zones and the rest of Gaza.
Have you considered moving that site, that one that doesn't seem to be secure?
So we are opening another site, not near there, but we are opening a bigger site. So site 1 is also closed to be rebuilt. It has been rebuilt, and we're in the final stages of checking security and logistics, making sure it'll be okay for the aid seekers, logistic and safety wise. Excuse me. That should be open within a couple of weeks. And that's actually, we haven't really gotten into our model yet, but that's actually the goal of that is to go to continuous distribution, which will continue to bring the pressure down in the areas where we're operating. So it's like 2 of our sites next to each other. And there's a good segue back to our model. So like I said, we have local workers who work alongside our humanitarian team. The humanitarian team are a lot of USAID folks, people from the UN, all sorts of INGOs, and their job is to make sure that our aid is delivered and distributed in a humane way, in a dignified way. They're not all Americans. One of the top humanitarian leaders at GHF is from France, is a Frenchman. They are not all Americans. They're from all over the world. And they have, done this for decades for their career. But there are a lot of former USAID Americans who are humanitarians. And then, yes, they work alongside our security personnel, which are highly trained, highly skilled and experienced, and more importantly, intelligent U.S. military veterans who are typically former special forces who, have the patience and the skill to have a job where they're constantly, one of the main Hamas threats is that they're trying to get us to shoot at a crowd. So it takes a lot of poise and training to know when not to do that. And we could talk about it more, but I would say we've never shot, none of our men and women, security personnel, have never shot a bullet at anyone during this course of this engagement, regardless of what you read about. And so we have these sites. 2 to 3 operational each day. We have only missed 3 days since we started on May 26th. One was the beginning of the Iran war. Another unique part of our model is we control our supply chain from beginning to end. We vet our suppliers very thoroughly. One of the problems with the legacy system was corruption and smuggling. So we don't allow for any of that. We've said no to a lot of potential suppliers because you can tell that they're in this for something other than delivering aid. And so we find bulk suppliers. They come to a warehouse in between Tel Aviv and Kerem Shalom, which is where the border crossing is, and we package it into GHF boxes. I was just at our warehouse operation the other day. It is a really impressive sight to see. People take bulk flour or lentils, put them first into individual size, family size bags, and then they put them into a box. Our boxes have 42,500 kcals. They are meant to be equivalent to or exceed UN and INGO standards of humanitarian aid, but they're also meant to be able to be carried home by individuals, particularly women. They contain enough food for a family of 5.5 to have 3 meals a day for 3.5 days. We've delivered over 2.8 million boxes. That's how we get the math to over 170 million meals delivered. So when I say that we've put 170 meals into the hands of the people who need it, we are literally putting it into their hands for them to take home. It's a little different than the legacy system. For example, you could see United Nations does bulk flour, so it's these giant bags of flour on the trucks, which we're in favor of different methods of distribution. It's not a criticism. It's just a different way to do it.
So when they do that or did that, who gets that flour? Like, how does it get into the hands of the people?
So they do something. You hear a lot about how we replaced the United Nations system. We did not. We were never meant to. We were supposed to be one part in a much bigger, more complicated solution to a very complex problem. GHF is in favor of more aid getting into Gaza. We push the IDF and the government of Israel to allow that, more of it every single day. In fact, when they approved us after the blockade as one of the first organizations to be allowed to operate in Gaza, we pushed publicly for them to allow the United Nations as well. So they had at one point 400 community distribution points. And so that bulk flour, for example, would go to a market or a family or an INGO locally and be distributed that way. Which is one way to do it. Ours is a little different. We have our own sites, which are bigger, right, than a market or a shop. And we do, we serve up to 10,000 Palestinians every single day at each site. And so our model has our trucks loaded with GHF boxes come in. They are accompanied by armored trucks that contain armed security personnel inside. The trucks are defensive in nature. They don't have weapons on top like you see. An IDF Humvee has a 50 cal or a large weapon on them. So they are defensive in nature. They go to the sites. The aid is downloaded from the trucks by forklift operators who are also mostly local Palestinian folks. And then that convoy leaves and goes back over the border. If we have a distribution, for example, at 9 a.m., another team, a mobile team goes in. It takes the humanitarians. If I'm going, it takes me and or media and the street personnel, and they go in, at 8 o'clock. There's a security briefing. There's a medical briefing. And then, preparations are made to let the Gazans inside the site. The IDF is holding them behind their lines, in front of their lines, and then the IDF lets them behind their lines, which is also unique. I'm not aware of many militaries who would do that, let 10,000 Palestinians behind their lines, and then they come into our site and they take their boxes and they leave. Communication and consistency is one of the most important parts of humanitarian aid organization or operation, I should say. The humanitarian team's job is to interact with the crowd. They hold focus groups. They'll bring, for example, like 12 women into a room privately, and the women humanitarian officers will ask them questions and make sure they're getting what they need and what their family needs, and that it's being done in a dignified manner. Many of our methods are ideas that came from the aid seekers themselves. One very small example of that is a flag system at one of our. So we now have it at 2 of our sites. The flag is red when we're closed. When we open, the flag is raised green so that the aid seekers can see it and they know that now it's safe or that this site is open. We also now so GHF is committed to innovation. One of the problems with the legacy system was a sort of my way or the highway attitude. You can still sort of see that in the news. But at GHF, we have changed almost every single day and adapted to a dynamic environment and the needs of the aid seekers. and we've built up a trust over the last 4 months with the aid seekers, built a two-way trust. They trust us to be consistent and to be there. If for some reason they didn't get anything on one day, they know that 9 a.m. the next day we're going to be open and we're going to be there still operating. So that's important. And we also have been transparent with the challenges. Every single aid organization operating in Gaza is meeting logistical challenges. It's happening in an ongoing war zone. And it's a very complicated, dangerous work. And we've been very transparent. One of the challenges we recently started to solve for was that in our model, younger, faster, fitter men could run into the site, leaving behind on occasion women, children, elderly, disabled. So now we have women's distributions. We started over a month, probably 6 weeks ago, holding aid back, dispersing the first part of the distribution where people come in and take it and leave. Once the men are gone, we then put aid direct boxes directly into the hands of the women. We are now up to 6,000 women a day at we have 2 sites that do women's distribution. So up anywhere from, I would say 8 to 12,000 women a day now. They organize themselves. They all come in, they sit down, we have volunteers. A deaf woman is organizing her friends and neighbors at SDS2 every day. And it's really an incredible sight to see during these distributions. And we wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have the trust that we have built up. The other thing I would mention at this point is we had another INGO working with us. It's been about same amount of time, probably 6 weeks, a month to 6 weeks. Samaritan's Purse is on site delivering medical aid. We have never refused medical aid to anyone who has come to our site. There are often heat injuries. There are a lot of pregnant women that have their own special needs that the Samaritan's Purse take care of. Before Samaritan's Purse was on site, it was highly trained medics, 18 Deltas from the military, who now work alongside Samaritan's Purse. But last time I was on site, I learned a couple things. One, the Gazans know that they can come to the Americans for medical aid and that they will not be turned away. And in fact, our Samaritan's Purse and our medics have taken care of people who have been treated at local hospitals like Nasser Hospital and maybe didn't get enough or didn't get it done in the right way. And they know that they can come. And we've fixed post-op surgery patients and patched up certain things like that. And last time I was on site, a teenage girl who, by the time I saw her in the Samaritan's Purse tent, was all smiles. I was told she is so overwhelmed by living in a war zone. She came to the site just because she knew she could go sit in the Samaritan's Purse tent and have an hour or two in the shade, a drink of water, and able to decompress. And just have a respite. And I'm getting emotional now. It's just incredible to see. And she told Samaritan's Purse she knows the Americans are there and that she can come and be safe while the sites are open. So, and to see all these people working together, the local Palestinian workers, the humanitarians, and the security personnel in Samaritan's Purse is really incredible to see. And the last thing I'll say about Samaritan's Purse, we were very grateful not only for their medical attention and help on site, but they've contributed very generously something called RUSF, Ready to Use Supplemental Food. The nickname for it is Plumpy Nut. It's a children's supplemental food. It has to be handed out individually because you eat too much of it. If you're hungry, you eat too much of it, it can have negative health consequences. So we hand it out during the women's distribution. We also have, so we've handed out almost 1 million packets of that over the past probably month. And so that's good to see. We have a few pilot programs currently happening. One for the RUSF, we have vetted some of the women who can take bulk RUSF to their families and neighbors and communities, so they get bigger boxes. We have a reservation system during the women's system where they get an ID card and they can sign up and reserve aid. We keep that highly encrypted, air gap separate. We don't share with anyone. The only use for that information is to make sure if someone signs up to get a box on a Tuesday that person gets the box. We're told that there's a lot of gratitude for that because now they don't have to run, they don't have to race, they don't have to, they know it's going to be there and they can come get it. I talked about opening, for lack of a better term, a super site that's bigger. the goal is to get the entire distribution to be like the women's distribution now, so that you show your ID card, you get your aid. If there's an issue with your card, you go get it solved for at another table, and it's much more orderly and safe for everybody.
So that way people can reserve for exactly the amount they need.
Exactly.
And then that box is packed for them.
And it's safe for them, and they are guaranteed to get it. So our sites are open for a couple of hours a day, or a distribution. Sometimes we do double distributions at sites, so it'll be open, anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. Putting aid into a line of 6,000 women's hands takes a couple of hours on its own. But we want to get to a point at the new site 1, where it's open for 16 hours. So not only do you not have to rush, to get there at 9, you can get there at 10 or 11. Now you can come anytime during the day, and your aid, you can get your aid. So that'll continue to bring the pressure down. It will be incredibly helpful now, since the environment is a little bit more dynamic because of the offensive up north that's sending more people down south. So I think that's the basics, or at least a good understanding of our model. And again, it's a little different. You see the United Nations does bulk aid, which again, GHF is in favor of many more aid organizations operating.
I'm confused about how that works. Your system is easy to understand, that a person who needs food comes and gets food.
That's right.
The UN distribution, I understand that a lot of the diversion ended up being sold. So then people would go to a market and pay for food that should have been free to them.
Yes.
But if it had gotten to the place where it needed to get to, and it was in bulk, do they open it up and then hand it out the way they would have sold it? Or how would that, or do they give a giant bulk bag to somebody to carry home?
Yeah, so the first thing I will say, something I forgot to mention, is our first day of operation, the aid seekers couldn't believe it was free, and many of them refused to leave the site because they were worried they had to pay, or they were in some sort of trouble for not paying. They just couldn't believe it. So you're right. There were many problems with the legacy system, the main being diversion. And it being sold by Hamas at prices their fellow countrymen couldn't afford, and price gouging. And we've all seen the footage of the Hamas folks, not starving, to put it diplomatically, in their tunnels and everything. And you can actually see currently. So the UN has been operating in Gaza since we have in May, and they're having trouble getting their aid where it needs to go. You can look on the UN's own website. They have a tool that has all sorts of metrics, and you can slice and dice it different ways. But their overall average over the last 4 months has been somewhere around 88% not getting where it's supposed to go, 88% diversion.
And have they been able to track what happens to that? So
they do not track where it goes, or who did it, or how it didn't get there. They just track that it didn't get to where it was supposed to go, which is, it doesn't matter, right? And we've had zero. Our aid convoys haven't even been attacked. And the Hamas threat for us really is their fellow Gazans, the aid seekers, and protecting them. They're under threat for being at our sites. And, of course, our security and humanitarian and local workers on site. There have been 2 terrorist attacks on our sites. If you want to hear about that.
What happened?
The first was, I think it was over the 4th of July weekend. A ball-bearing Iranian Hamas-style grenade was thrown over the berm at one of our sites and injured 2 American workers who are okay, who are injured but okay now. And the second was the only incident of casualties on our site. It was a really tragic and unfortunate day when Hamas fomented a stampede. So one of the reasons, we have armed security personnel is to protect the crowd from itself. A big crowd is a dangerous thing and it's hard to control. The IDF has their methods, which we believe are less safe than American methods, and we criticize them publicly and push them privately almost every day to do things in a safer way. But Hamas fomented a stampede, and 19 aid seekers were tragically trampled to death. And we identified Hamas agent in the crowd. He had been there a couple of days. case in the joint, for lack of a better term. The same thing happened, by the way, with the grenade throwing. For a couple of days prior to that, little kids were coming and throwing rocks up over the berm of the guardhouses, which, if you've been in a war zone before, I haven't, but I'm told, is common. And then on one day, one of the things that were thrown happened to be a grenade. And so Hamas fomented this stampede. And this
how does somebody foment a...
So you could push people from behind. They did that. We had to shut down a couple women's distributions when we first started them because they sent men. There's always an active disinformation campaign. So we now have regular distributions. We did not in the beginning because of the war zone. So we would try and communicate the best we could in a comprehensive way through social media. Many of them have their own devices, so Telegram channels. Like I said, the flag system was part of that communication effort, and word of mouth. And Hamas was always in the background saying that we would be open at 7 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. to build the crowd in a war zone, right? Which is dangerous. It's also dangerous for the people on site, to have 10,000 in the beginning, right? One of our first distributions was not pretty because we didn't understand how the crowd was going to operate on day one, and they didn't understand how we were trying to operate things. And so 10,000 people rushed the site, right? And it did not look pretty. And so if you compare that with now, right, we're transparent about our issues and the challenges that we're trying to solve for, and we're trying to do everything we can to do it in a dignified, humane way. And now you see 6,000 women lining themselves up and sitting down in the middle of the site, joking, smiling with the security personnel, humanitarians, local workers, and it's quite a sight to see. But so you can do many things to rile up a crowd, and that's what they did. I don't know that they'd be able to do that now. We rely actually on the aid seekers. A lot of the threat assessment is directly from them, and they tell our people when there might be a threat in the area, or they see someone acting strange. And so I wanted to point out, I said before, our men and women, yes, there are women, former soldiers on our team as well, have never shot a weapon at anyone. They have in the past used non-lethal methods to disperse the crowds, but they've never shot at anyone. They have shot into the air a few times. On the day of the stampede, a former Marine shot into the air so he could run into the crowd, into the stampede, and save a child's life, which he did. That same guy, the Hamas agent pulled a pistol, an Iranian pistol, on him. He didn't raise his weapon. He ran at the guy. And tackled him and wrestled the gun away that way. And the Hamas agent, sort of fled back into the crowd. And a lesser trained, soldier with a gun may have shot into that crowd. Our guys are not hired because they know how to pull a trigger. They're hired and they're there because they know how not to pull a trigger. So those are the kind of multiple people's lives were saved that day, including one of our U.S. security contractors who was pulled and dragged into the stampede, and his life was in danger, and a half a dozen female Gazan aid seekers came to his rescue, pulled him out, and pulled him to safety. So these are the kind of stories that are happening on these sites. Gazans and Americans and international folks working together, all to feed people. We haven't had any instances of violence other than those two examples. And the trampling, the unfortunate stampede was the only deaths we've had on site. Like I said, our security personnel are there to make sure everyone can be fed in a safe, dignified, humane manner, and they have never shot anyone. They would never shoot at anyone, in my opinion.
Well, that's pretty remarkable, especially given the level of threat that would be perceived. You said something earlier about shootings. You said regardless of what you may have read about or something like that, as far as shootings, what are you referring to?
Well, so there's been reporting that there have been shooting casualties at our sites. That is false, period, full stop. The other issue in this war, in this conflict, is that the IDF uses live fire for crowd control purposes. The American military is not trained to do that. Our security personnel would not do that. It's not like last on a list of tactics. It's just not on the list of tactics. In fact, if a site was overrun, they would just flee, right? They're not going to shoot at people. And by the way, they know that Hamas is trying to get them to shoot people, and we have heard reports of Hamas is actually shooting aid seekers as part of the casualties. And many media outlets are reporting the casualties as if all of them are on their way to GHF sites. Every casualty is a tragedy. Make no mistake. I'm not here to tell you that there are no casualties. But many of those statistics are coming out of the Gaza Ministry of Health, which also runs the hospitals, right? Nasser Hospital is run by the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is Hamas. And there's no moral equivalency between Hamas and the IDF, which is a professional modern military that does investigations and tries to do the right thing. We have been particularly harsh on the IDF when they make things less safe for us. Our mission is to feed people, period. And any organization or group of people or individual that makes that harder more dangerous, we call them out. You can see on our website, we've called out the IDF multiple times. We call it the government of Israel all the time to allow us to do more, to allow the United Nations to do more, and to do things in a safer way. But there have been no casualties at our sites. Our responsibility is to feed people and to keep them safe and secure while that's happening, and we have a impeccable record in that regard, except for the stampede. You'd have to ask the IDF about other casualties throughout Gaza during this conflict. GHF is pro ceasefire. We believe, of course, that a ceasefire would make everything safer, and including and especially for the aid seekers. So we're pro ceasefire.
Without conditions?
So that's for politicians and everyone to discuss. GHF was actually a condition of Hamas's back during peace talks a couple months ago. They were going to require any ceasefire include us being removed from Gaza, which I think is all you need to know about the success of our mission in feeding their own people. We're also in favor of more aid. We are in favor of the airdrops, however, concerned about the safety and security of those. You can see that those are dangerous. We are very much in favor of the United Nations distributing their aid, though very concerned about the safety and security of how they're doing it. You can see all over social media videos of, at best, their trucks are being swarmed, like I said, by 10,000. You know, we've gone through this logistical challenge and have solved for it. They are now currently going through a logistical challenge that we have overcome, which is 10,000 very hungry, desperate people in the north running at their trucks. Truck drivers are being pulled out and beaten, and people are getting run over or trampled. Like I said, they do bulk distribution, so people are ripping apart these giant bags of flour or having trouble carrying it. And, you know, one family is going to get one giant bag of flour and that's it. So more work has to be done once they get home. And at worst, you see armed men and Hamas riding these trucks around Gaza City and other places up north. But we are in favor of the United Nations being able to operate, and we actually have an open invitation and offer to collaborate with them. We did a press briefing from, GHF's executive director is a lifelong humanitarian, 30 years with the USAID. He's been in Iraq, Afghanistan, all sorts of...
And who's that?
His name is John Acree. Is the executive director of GHF. He's a lifelong humanitarian. He held a press briefing a couple weeks ago that laid out a few ways that we could help the UN. We could provide, like I said, we've overcome the logistical challenge of sites being overrun. And now we have a smooth, orderly, safe process. We can advise on security matters and on logistics. And by the way, we believe the UN could help us. They have an unlimited supply of aid. We could distribute their aid through our sites that we've proven to be safe.
Why don't they want to work with you? Why not?
So you're going to have to ask the UN and their leadership. But we have had meetings with them at a high level. Our executive chairman of the board, Reverend Johnny Moore, has had productive meetings. The General Assembly is kicking off this week. So people are discussing this very issue. One of the reasons the UN has criticized us is that we use armed security, and they believe that violates humanitarian principles. We very much disagree, and I would point out that the United Nations uses armed security in many places around the world, and even works with one particular side in an armed conflict, like Sudan, Bosnia, Haiti. So this is the only place on planet Earth where the United Nations has a problem with Armada. But like I said, we are very optimistic and hopeful that we can one day sooner rather than later work with the UN. If we all work together, sat at a table like this and solve for challenges, imagine how many people we could feed. And after all, that's why all of us are there.
You were talking a little bit earlier about the people who work for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. You said they're not all American. Are any of them Israeli?
I don't think we have any Israeli employees. And the other thing about that is Israelis are not allowed into Gaza. We have brought media in and had issues when, it's an Israeli cameraman who doesn't get allowed in. So I do not think we have Israeli employees. We also do not have IDF. IDF is not on our sites, and never have been. They of course are outside the sites because they're, that's the areas that they are responsible for. We also, are accused, of being an Israeli organization. Like I said, we are an American nonprofit incorporated in Delaware. We have no relationship with the government of Israel other than we are allowed to we are approved to operate in Gaza just like the United Nations and any other INGO that is operating in Gaza. And again, we work with the IDF to deconflict outside our sites. One of the dangerous parts of our operation is, like I said, our sites are central and south where the IDF controls, and we have to communicate our movements every step of the way, to prevent friendly fire and to ensure that, the IDF on the ground understand that a truck full of food and our men is coming towards them. So we do work with them in those regards. But no, we don't have Israeli employees. And we also do not take money from the government of Israel.
Your story about the injured workers reminded me of videos that have been circulating of Palestinians in Gaza who are accused of being collaborators and are being murdered, executed, publicly executed. Some of them are, there are videos of, these are just awful, horrific videos of beatings, often taking very large objects to break legs and arms. What's the security for the people who seek aid? The people who are working for you are now living inside your compound because they're so unsafe as a result of that. And since Hamas has been so against your organization, is it a concern for people who seek aid that Hamas is going to come after them?
So there's no question that it's an issue. But you will find a lot of the aid seekers that we speak to and come to our site every day have very negative things to say about Hamas. I was actually struck by that. I thought they would be more reluctant to speak out, but to a person, every single dozens. I've been there a couple times a week for the last 2 months. I've seen dozens of interviews and focus groups. They all understand that Hamas is the reason, or at least they say they understand Hamas is the reason that they're in this position. They have a lot of praise for America. They know that they could trust our organization and the Americans to do the right thing, which is nice to see. But there is no question that these are desperate, hungry people who live in a war zone. Like I said, we push the IDF to do things more safely, but they're waging a war, and we do not dictate war tactics to the IDF. I was once asked by a reporter that we brought to a site on the way out. We were in the truck, and he said, "I just witnessed what I would say was a very successful distribution. Is it frustrating for you to hear that someone may be injured on their way home?" And I said immediately, "Yes, of course it's frustrating. We have men and women local workers, humanitarians, and security personnel who risk their lives every single day just to put food into people's hands. So yes, when things are more dangerous than they should be, we are very frustrated and we push back very hard. It's a dangerous place, and it's an unfortunate situation. I'm not here to, the four humanitarian principles are humanity, neutrality, independence, and impartiality. So we call for a ceasefire, but it's for the politicians and the warring factions to come together on that. We're just going to keep continuing feeding people until the full need is met, to the best of our ability. But yeah, there's no question that this is dangerous. This is, sorry to be repetitive, but it's the most complex humanitarian crisis of our lifetime, and it's happening in a war zone. People do come to our sites, and then they have to go home and live in a war zone. And your heart goes out to everybody, and that's why all these guys, men and women, do this every single day. My first trip out there back in early July, I was in one of our trucks on the way in, and the security personnel were just talking about ideas on ways to make things safer and more efficient. And this guy turns around, 6'6" guy with tattoos, former special forces guy. He goes, "We just want this to work, man. We just want these people to go home with food." So that's the kind of mentality that everyone on site has. But unfortunately, it's happening in a war zone, and so that's why we have security personnel to protect not only the aid, but the aid seekers and everyone else.
It's also happening in a propaganda war zone. What have you been most surprised about regarding the accusations about what you're doing? Did you think, well, this is going to be obviously good, and so therefore people aren't going to make stuff up about it, or?
Well, my joke is, who would have thought feeding people would be so controversial? So that I was a little bit surprised by that. I've always followed, Middle East issues around Israel in particular. So I knew that things would be inflamed here and emotional and politicized. But I am struck after being here at the intensity of it. I also come from politics, government, and PR in America. So we're very used to the quote unquote biased media. But in America, if you confront a reporter that he or she has said something that, printed or said something that was not accurate, they may grumble. They may have to, get their lawyer editor involved, but they will usually do something to make it right, even if it's not enough. I have never seen anything like the international media coverage of this conflict and these issues arising out of it. And us, when confronted with just outright falsehoods, they still go to air, go to print. And I'm not defending it, but this is a highly politicized, highly emotional situation. And so that's been unfortunate. So I knew that the media can be difficult to deal with. That's what I've been doing for the last 30 years. But I was struck by the intensity of it, for sure. I do think the government of Israel and the IDF are not very good at communicating. I do think GHF has been too cautious in communicating. So I push for more transparency and to bring more reporters in. They're currently banned. The government of Israel has banned reporters in Gaza. They bring them in on occasion. But I push every day for more people to see what we're doing, because if you, for example, went to a site tomorrow morning, you would see people run in, take food, a little bit of controlled chaos in the beginning when the men run in and grab the boxes and run out. And then you're going to see 6,000 women sit down, get handed a box, and walk out, very slowly and calmly.
What is that process? Why does the women and children process happen after the men?
So, well, for many reasons. One is, like I said, they get left behind. So in our model, and this is a challenge we were trying to solve for, right? We are not perfect, and we're happy to admit mistakes and challenges. But so in the beginning, right, the fitter, faster men had an advantage. And sometimes women and children got left behind. So one of our limitations is we only fit so much aid in a site at once, right? So we have one distribution, and when the aid is gone, we close the site. Another thing about our security personnel, they now protect the women on their way out. If there's anyone milling around, they'll tell them to get lost, and there'll be consequences if you mess with them. I forgot to mention this. Another reason our model is working when it comes to no diversion by Hamas is that, if you divert a UN truck, it's, enough flour to keep you fed or financed for many weeks at a minimum. If you can't, our convoys are protected, so you're not stealing a GHF truck. It hasn't even been attempted. And on the way out, you would have to steal so many boxes from so many people to have enough. If you want to do it to starve them or for prevent them from eating, or for you to have enough to feed your army, or to sell, you'd have to take thousands and thousands of boxes off thousands of people. Culturally, that's much more difficult, right? To take something that now this woman owns off of her, and just logistically, Hamas does not have no army really has the ability to do that at scale. So that's another reason our model is working. And so, that's why we have forklifts, right? We keep it behind, an area where you can't see it. And when all the men have left, the forklifts come and they bring the women's aid. And then that's why they sit down waiting for that to happen. They wait for the crowd to disperse. Also, the men now know, right? They know they can mill around for hours. They're not, if they wanted to, nothing's going to happen, right? And so, like I said, we haven't used any crowd control, non-lethal tactics that look scary but aren't. In weeks since I've been out there, and the only occasions they are used is sometimes one of the challenges we are trying to solve for now is that at one of our sites there's a longer road, almost a kilometer, which again, when you hear that there was a casualty within a kilometer of SCS-3 in particular, it's false. The IDF is more than a kilometer away, and the aid seekers are more than a kilometer away before the gates are opened, or before they're left behind IDF lines, and they travel down this couple of roads. And now they have motorcycles and donkey carts, and so they get there very quickly. And those, now primarily men, are done and have their stuff. And now they're leaving while still thousands and thousands of people are pouring in. So they're zipping their motorcycles backwards through the crowd, which is dangerous. So our security personnel are out there in the chute to ensure that doesn't happen, right? So everything that they do is to protect the crowd first, and of course everyone else on site.
Just to conclude, what's the situation now vis-a-vis the UN's distribution and your distribution, and are there any other organizations that are considering doing other kinds of distribution? Are there still airdrops? What's the sort of lay of the land, so to speak, of all of it?
Sure. So let me start with GHF is an emergency food distribution operation. So that's one small part. A humanitarian effort is way more comprehensive than that. Fuel, water, baby food. We're about to come on the winter season in this region of the world. So winterization products and things like that need to be distributed.
Does it get cold there?
It gets rainy and muddy, for sure. So we distribute currently in cardboard boxes. So that is a problem that we are currently working on to ensure that we have a product that will last and survive through mud and rain. We're working with Samaritan's Purse to distribute winterization products that they have distributed in the past. We're also working with Samaritan's Purse on building wells at our site so we can do continuous water distribution. And so there are other things that the Gazans need, like baby formula. That's another, like RUSF, a little bit more complicated. You can't just pump baby formula in without doing it in a structured way. But there are other NGOs doing that in Gaza.
Wasn't there just a truckload of baby formula that was commandeered somehow? Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. It's sad to see. The way I describe it is there's nothing humanitarian about some of these other systems. Our model is working, and that's why we have an offer to work with anyone. Any organization that wants to work with us, we're happy to have at least a meeting, and I'm confident with our lifelong humanitarians and theirs, they can figure out a good way to do this.
There was a period of time where I recall seeing images of pallets and pallets and pallets of food and other humanitarian items that had crossed into Gaza but were not being distributed.
Yeah.
Why was that?
Well, you're going to have to ask those organizations. They, and it was being echoed and amplified in the media, were saying that Israel was not allowing them inside Gaza.
But they were.
That was not true. Yes, I have been there. I was there. It was right when I first got here, I believe, one of my first couple of weeks. And there were, Colgate says, I think 1,000 trucks. That's a lot of aid sitting, rotting in the sun. I personally saw rice from Jordan cooking in the sun, medical aid already expired. I think it was political reasons. There was also, it was an issue. It wasn't an issue of access. It was an issue of execution. You know, I think once Colgate allowed reporters to come see those trucks, there was some pressure in the press for the United Nations to start moving those farther or distributed because they were already inside Gaza and it wasn't the access problem that they were claiming. Whether it was politics or whether they couldn't do the job, right? Their own metrics at the UN are saying that it's very difficult for them to get their trucks where they're supposed to go. So yes, that is true.
And is that over now, or there?
It is. So the government of Israel does approve the UN and other organizations to move trucks across the border and into Gaza. Nobody thinks it's enough, including GHF. We push them to allow them to do more. We wish we could do more. We push them to allow us to expand. This is why we have an open offer. You mentioned baby formula truck got commandeered or diverted, is the broader term. We have had zero diversion. Right? That was part of our mission, to feed people in a way that Hamas or anyone else can't divert it. And we've successfully executed that mission. It's funny you bring that up. I spoke my first trip into Gaza. We stopped so I could see those trucks sitting there in the sun, and we spoke to a couple of truck drivers. They weren't UN proper. I think they were in one of the umbrella organizations, but it's one of the most dangerous jobs in Gaza is to be a INGO truck driver, except for ours, of course. But the United Nations uses local Palestinian truck drivers, just like we have local workers running our sites. And they told us the day before that we were there, they tried to move the trucks in, their trucks, the 5 of them. They were immediately shot at. They were going to get killed or kidnapped. All the aid was taken, and they ran back to the safer area in Gaza where their trucks were. And then they asked, could you provide security for us? I was standing there with a group of our security guys, and our answer was, yes, of course we can. Talk to your leadership. So we've made that offer publicly. The Reverend Johnny Moore has had meetings that we think are productive. A couple of weeks ago, not widely reported, of course, but over 200 INGOs from over 15 countries wrote a letter to the UN, an open letter to the UN urging them and other international NGOs to work and collaborate with us, including funding and logistics and security and all of that. And we stand ready, willing, and able to do that. Despite whatever the UN says about us or anyone else, we are ready, willing, and able because our mission is to feed people. If you want to do the same, we are willing to work with you.
It's so interesting because I had not heard of that. That does not seem to have made it into the media. But I had heard that there were lots of complaints from other organizations about, and not complaints specific to working with you because they weren't working with you, but right. A sort of petition to kick you out, essentially.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to get into the motivations of so-called humanitarians. You'll have to ask them. But I will say, take out the politics and the corruption and the problem and the failure of the legacy system. GHF is a new way of doing things. It's a disruptor in a decades, if not century-old industry. And change is hard. And to quote a movie, the first people through the wall always get bloody. So I think there's some of that happening. The government of Israel notoriously kicked UNRWA out of the region. Not sure they're ever going to come back. But the other United Nations organizations are operating and are allowed to, so we hope to work with them. I don't have a good answer as to why GHF is so highly criticized and vilified, other than our model is working. We have put over 170 million meals directly into the hands of tens of thousands of Gazans.
And who is that a problem for?
Well, it's a problem for Hamas, for sure. They have, like I said, they made it one of their negotiation points whenever that was, 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, when they were actively negotiating with Israel. One of their sticking points was GHF had to go. Another interesting note, you brought up the time period. It was a couple of weeks where the UN and other INGOs were inside Gaza but not moving the trucks further or distributing. And I've already told you repeatedly that we've had zero diversion. The Washington Post wrote an article about how Hamas's finances were in jeopardy and being decimated, and they were having trouble waging war and recruiting fighters, and it happened during that time. Now, the Washington Post didn't connect those dots, but I will just tell you it's not a coincidence that you can't steal GHF's aid and the UN wasn't delivering aid, that Hamas was having trouble with their finances. That is not a coincidence. So our model is working. We believe we can help the United Nations solve for that problem. We also believe the United Nations could help us because, like I said, they have an unlimited supply of aid, different types of aid, and we have a system that is pumping aid into, for now, southern Gaza and central Gaza, and hopefully into the north soon. Again, we push the IDF to, conclude that as soon as they can and make things safer for everybody, especially us who want, and the aid seekers to deliver food. But yeah, you'd have to ask them their motivations. But again, GHF doesn't care. We're willing to work with whomever, including the United Nations and their leadership, who's been highly critical and I think a little disingenuous when it comes to GHF. But no matter, we are happy to collaborate, and we are hopeful and optimistic that one day soon that will happen. And again, imagine how many people we could feed if we work together.
Well, thank you very much. And I wish you luck. It's important work.
Thanks. Appreciate the time.
الأمريكي رئيسه ترامب بنشكره على وقفته معانا ولو ما وقفته يعني الحمد لله لا أكل لا شرب ونشكره وإن شاء الله يا رب يخلص الحرب ونرجع بيوتنا بأمان أكتر.